Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A monorail was installed for demonstration in the 1950s in Houston, Texas, as an example of modern transportation. The project sought to present fast and efficient alternatives for urban mobility. A couple touched hands through a barbed wire fence in 1961 in the city of Berlin, Germany, at the moment when the physical division was beginning to be raised. The gesture symbolized the separation of families and relationships amid the city's political transformation. A woman drank tea among the rubble of her home in 1940 in the city of London, England, after the intense air attacks that hit the capital. The gesture represented the attempt to maintain normality amid difficulties. A British citizen calmly drank tea in 1940 in the city of London, England, during a period of intense air raid alerts. The habit of tea served as a symbol of normality amid the tension. The ship RMS Queen Mary arrived in the port of New York on June 20, 1945, in the United States, bringing back thousands of American soldiers from Europe. The vessel had been adapted for military transport during the conflict. A German submarine ran aground on the coast shortly after the First World War in 1919 on the shoreline of the United Kingdom, becoming an attraction for residents and visitors. The vessel had been decommissioned and no longer had a military function. Children waited in line to receive a dose of medicine in 1939 in England during public health campaigns. The authorities sought to ensure basic care amid the difficulties of the time. Children were recorded at work inside a textile factory in the early 1900s at an unidentified location in the United States, showing the routine of industrial labor. The conditions reflected the reality of many families who depended on the extra income of their children. Construction work on Hoover Dam progressed on July 7, 1930, on the border between Nevada and Arizona, United States, as part of one of the largest engineering projects of the 20th century. A large field gathered parked military jeeps in the summer of 1945 in the United States, shortly after the end of the Second World War. The vehicles had been widely used on different fronts of combat. Logging workers posed inside the trunk of a felled tree in 1892 at Camp Badger in Tulare County, California, after finishing the cut. Ladders were propped inside the wood to show the size of the structure. A close-up showed workers carving the face of Abraham Lincoln in the 1930s during the construction of Mount Rushmore in the United States while the project was underway. A light painting experiment was carried out in 1949 in the United States by the photographer Guillaume Milly in collaboration with Pablo Picasso. The technique consisted of drawing in the air using a small light source captured by the camera. Passengers traveled aboard a Boeing 307 of Pan American World Airways in the 1940s in the United States, enjoying the comfort of commercial flight. The aircraft was one of the first to offer a pressurized cabin, allowing travel at higher altitude. A photographer captured aerial images during a flight in 1912 over the city of Berlin, Germany, using adapted photographic equipment. The practice was part of the earliest experiences of photography from the sky. A group of people practiced an early form of land windsurfing in the early 1900s on a beach in the United States using a wheeled, sail-powered vehicle. The equipment combined elements of maritime navigation with movement on solid ground. A truck adapted as a mobile pool drove through the streets in 1960 in New York City, United States, offering community recreation. The structure brought recreational activities to neighborhoods without easy access to swimming areas. Two groups of youths, known as Toffs and Toughs, were portrayed side by side in 1937 in Great Britain, symbolizing the social divide of the period before the Second World War. The photograph contrasted elite students with youths from working-class backgrounds. 9 European monarchs were gathered for an official photograph on May 20, 1910, in London, England, during the ceremonies related to the passing of King Edward VII. The meeting marked a rare occasion when so many sovereigns appeared together at the same event. King George V and Queen Mary were portrayed in 1897 in the United Kingdom during an official record of the British royal family. The image highlighted the prominence of the monarchy at the end of the 19th century. Passengers disembarked from an electric streetcar in 1914 on 42nd Street in New York City, using one of the main urban transportation methods of the period. The streetcar system helped connect different neighborhoods and made daily life easier for residents. 2 residents took part in the Mop Fair around 1900 in the village of Bidford-on-Avon, England, a traditional event held annually. The celebration brought together merchants, workers, and families for leisure and business activities. Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis were together on the film set in 1984 in the United States during the production of the film Ghostbusters. The trio appeared dressed in their iconic uniforms. The Los Angeles Fire Department was on duty in 1884 in California, United States. During the early years of the local organization, the teams used basic equipment and horse-drawn vehicles. Teenagers prepared for a school dance in the 1920s in the United States, wearing formal clothing typical of the period. Social events in schools were part of the community life of young people and families. Ralph Edwards and Marilyn Monroe took part in a charity baseball game between entertainers in 1952 in Hollywood, United States, bringing together major names in entertainment. A crescent-shaped haircut was recorded in 1895 in the United States, representing an aesthetic curiosity of the period. Distinctive styles helped mark personal identity and creativity. Lo Man Hung was only 12 years old when he became a photojournalist in 1968 in South Vietnam, being recognized as the youngest in the profession in the country. The work consisted of recording local events through photography. Lone Wolf and Etla, members of the Kiowa Apache indigenous people, were portrayed in 1860 in the United States in an ethnographic record of the period. The clothing and adornments preserved cultural traditions of their community. A couple skated on Whitestone Pond in 1933 in the Hampstead neighborhood of London, enjoying the frozen lake during winter. The practice of seasonal sports was common in open areas of the city. Princess Elizabeth posed beside her fiancé Philip Mountbatten on July 10, 1947, at Buckingham Palace in London during an official engagement photograph. The portrait marked an important moment in the public life of the future Queen of the United Kingdom. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall were photographed aboard Bogart's private boat in 1945 in the United States during the early years of their relationship. The couple became one of Hollywood's most iconic pairs of the era. 2 indigenous people of the Upsaroki stood on horseback in front of a teepee in 1908 in the state of Montana, United States, with the scene covered in snow. The photograph preserved aspects of a traditional way of life amid the changes of the early 20th century. Irish fishermen were portrayed at work in 1910 in Ireland during the preparation of boats and working nets. Fishing was one of the main sources of livelihood for coastal communities. People enjoyed outdoor activities in the 1970s at Muscle Beach in California, United States, one of the best-known spots for sports and leisure. The location brought together gymnasts, weightlifters, and public performances. Soviet immigrants offered bowls of borscht for free on March 6, 1953, in New York City, United States, as a way to mark the news of the leadership change in their country of origin. A living menu was presented at the bar Barney Google's in 1968 in New York City, United States, as an unusual form of entertainment. The idea was part of creative strategies used to attract customers. A mother taught her children to read and write in 1937 in the community of Transylvania, Louisiana, United States, within the home setting. The moment reflected families' efforts to ensure basic education for children. Women used plastic head covers during a snowstorm in 1939 in the city of Montreal, Canada, showing a practical solution for severe weather. The accessory helped preserve hairstyles and clothing during bad weather. The young Samuel Reshevsky, only 8 years old, played simultaneously against several chess masters in 1920 in France, drawing attention for his early skill. The event brought together experienced players and a curious public to follow the match. Engine Alley appeared busy in 1900 in the city of Dublin, Ireland, with residents moving about and carts on the road. The space reflected urban daily life in the Irish capital at the beginning of the 20th century. A model of a home telephone was used in 1959 in the United States, representing the evolution of domestic communication. The device highlighted the characteristic design of the 1950s. Employees posed in front of the post office in the 1920s in Greenville, South Carolina, United States, recording part of the local staff. The Postal Service was one of the main means of communication in that period. Charlton Heston used a scooter behind the scenes during the filming of Ben-Hur in 1959 in Italy during the breaks-in shooting. The actor became world famous for the leading role in the historical epic. The city of Detroit experienced a period of intense industrial activity in the 1940s in the United States, driven mainly by automotive production. The streets reflected urban growth tied to factories and the flow of workers. Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner were photographed during the filming of The Bodyguard in 1992 in the United States, a production that became a worldwide success. The feature film marked Houston's debut in cinema and strengthened her international career. The Capilano Suspension Bridge welcomed visitors in 1906 in the city of Vancouver, Canada, as one of the best-known local attractions. The structure spanned the Capilano River and offered passage through the forest. Booksellers occupied their stalls in 1930 near Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, offering works to residents and visitors. The stands were part of the Parisian cultural tradition connected to reading. Men posed in traditional Dutch clothing in 1900 in the Netherlands, wearing wide pants, button shirts, and characteristic wooden clogs. The outfits represented the cultural identity of different regions of the country. Italian immigrants worked on paving streets in 1900 in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts, United States, contributing to the development of urban infrastructure. The ship RMS Mauritania underwent dry dock maintenance in 1909 in the city of Liverpool, England, during its early phase of operation. The vessel was one of the most advanced of the time, built for transatlantic transport. Men and women displayed typical fashion outfits in the 1920s in the United States, representing the elegance and modernity of the period. The clothing showed looser cuts and striking accessories. Workers and passengers moved through the Grand Trunk Railway facilities in 1905 in Canada, during a period of railway expansion. The rail lines were essential for transporting people and goods across long distances. A group of men and women took part in a social gathering in 1860 in Europe in an elegant and decorated setting. These meetings were common among prominent families to strengthen ties and promote personal connections. The Procrastinators Club held a gathering dedicated to the War of 1812 on March 9, 1966, in the city of Philadelphia, United States, bringing members together in a mood of humor and relaxation. The group became known for organizing events in an ironic way and outside the usual timing. Pasta was set out to dry on large structures in 1929 in Italy as part of the traditional food production process. The method used outdoor racks to prepare the pasta before packaging. The London Underground had already been operating for more than 100 years at the start of the 20th century in the United Kingdom, carrying passengers in its early models of rail cars. The subway network was the first in the world, inaugurated in 1863. An office setting was recorded in the 1920s in the United States, showing aligned desks, typewriters, and organized documents. The routines reflected the growing importance of administrative work in the period. Young people gathered for leisure in the 1940s in the United States, enjoying free time together. Social activities of this kind were common among friends in urban and rural areas. The Los Angeles Public Library maintained a bookmobile service dedicated to sick people in 1928 in the United States, taking books directly to those who could not travel. The project was part of social initiatives aimed at inclusion in access to reading. Employees of a large store took a lunch break around 1900 in the United States, gathered as a group during the work interval. The long workdays required collective moments of rest. Several Citroën DS automobiles moved through the streets in 1967 in the city of Paris, France, highlighting the model's futuristic design. The car became a symbol of the French automotive industry of the period. Calle Mayor brought together pedestrians and moving vehicles in the 1950s in Madrid, Spain, being one of the city's most traditional streets. The urban scene reflected the typical architecture of the historic center. Women displayed characteristic hairstyles in the 1920s in the United States, marked by short cuts and modern styles. The look accompanied cultural changes connected to fashion and women's independence. The Edison lighting team posed beside its work wagon around 1900 in the city of Detroit, United States, during the expansion of electric lighting. The employees used basic equipment to install and maintain the network. The restaurant La Coupole welcomed heavy crowds in the 1930s in Paris, France, being one of the most famous spots of the city's cultural life. The space brought together artists, intellectuals, and visitors in a sophisticated setting. Boulevard Saint-Germain appeared busy in 1950 in Paris, France, recorded by the photographer Maurice Zalewski. The avenue was one of the centers of intellectual and cultural life in the French capital. A Parisian restaurant welcomed customers in a characteristic setting in 1890 in France, reflecting the style and customs of the time. Dining spaces were important points of urban social life. A woman prepared herself by wearing a crinoline around 1860 in Europe, a structured piece used to add volume to skirts. The accessory was an essential part of 19th century women's fashion. Children boarded for classes in a horse-drawn school transport in 1904 in the city of West Lynn, Oregon, United States, reflecting the resources available at the time. The improvised vehicle was adapted to take groups of students to school. Sophia Loren had breakfast at Cafe Reggio in 1958 in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of New York City, United States, during a visit to the city. The place was known as one of the most traditional and cultural cafes in Manhattan. The famous La Brea tar pits appeared surrounded by visitors in 1959 in the city of Los Angeles, United States, with the May Company department store in the background. The site was known for the fossils preserved in its natural tar soil. Barges were moored at Hayes Wharf in 1938 in the district of Southwark, London, England, in a record made by the Topical Press Agency. The location was an important center for storage and distribution of goods. Actors who would play the Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz arrived at the MGM studios in 1938 in the United States during the preparation for filming. The group was part of the supporting cast of one of Hollywood's most notable productions. Michael Caine appeared beside Natalie Wood in the 1960s in the United States in a light moment recorded in a promotional photograph. The meeting brought together two major stars of the cinema of the era. Winners of a beauty contest posed together in 1922 in the United States, representing the popularization of this type of event at the beginning of the 20th century. The competitions highlighted fashion, elegance, and the aesthetic standards of the time. A camp of native peoples was recorded in 1890 on the Great Plains in the United States, with teepees raised in an open area. The scene reflected traditional ways of life tied to the region. The actress Gina Lollobrigida posed in her early career years in the 1940s in Italy, a period when she was beginning to gain recognition in European cinema. Her talent and presence would make her one of the greatest stars of the era. Princess Elizabeth appeared beside her corgi named Dookie in 1936 in the United Kingdom when she was only 10 years old. The animal was one of the first dogs of the lineage that would become a symbol of the British royal family. A man nicknamed the heaviest in Europe was photographed in 1955 at a public event on the European continent, attracting the curiosity of visitors and journalists. Displays of this kind were common at fairs and shows of the period. The interior of a Pullman car showed upholstered seats and detailed finishes in the late 19th century in the United States, offering uncommon comfort for the time. These cars were designed for long-distance travel with greater convenience. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.